Welcome back to the MVP of Personal Injury Law. I'm Kara, and today we're here with Chelsee Sachs from MVP Accident Attorneys. Today we are talking about how to file a car accident claim in Sacramento and the common mistakes that wreck a claim before it even gets started. We are going to cover what to do at the scene, how California's pure comparative negligence system actually works, the deadlines that can end a case permanently, dealing with insurance companies, and the mistakes that hurt people the most. Whether the crash happened on the I-5, the I-80, the US 50, the Capital City Freeway, or anywhere in Sacramento County, this episode is for you. The first few minutes after a crash are the most important and the most disorienting. So what should someone do in the first few minutes after a car accident in Sacramento to protect their claim?
I think 100%, first thing you need to do is assess yourself, assess your body, and assess how you're feeling. Also assess anyone else in the car with you. Make sure that everyone's okay. And if they're not okay, get the police and ambulance and any other responders out immediately. Documenting what's going on is key. And documenting what's going on in these first few minutes is important. The other thing you need to do is you need to get to a safe place. If you are, for instance, on a highway, you've got to get over to that shoulder. You don't want to get hit again. And you want to make sure that, again, you're safe. A lot of times the highway patrol comes immediately to help you with that. And again, gets you over to the shoulder safely or gets you off the freeway. Or maybe you need a tow, something like that. Again, assessing what's happening in this incredibly challenging and confusing situation is really important so that you can get the help you need immediately, whether it's from a medical professional or from law enforcement.
And then Sacramento has 3 different law enforcement agencies that could respond to a single crash, kind of depending on where it happened. So which agency actually responds to a car accident, depending on where it happens in the Sacramento area?
Sacramento has a number of competent law enforcement agencies that are going to help you and respond to a car accident if you need it. There's, of course, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, which is going to respond if you're in some kind of unincorporated territory up in Sacramento or surrounding areas. You have the Sacramento Police Department or other independent police departments like the Folsom Police Department or the Elk Grove Police Department. And of course, you have the California Highway Patrol, who's going to respond if you're on the highway. So, again, you have so many credible agencies up there that depending on where you are, there's always someone to help.
A lot of people walk away from a crash in Sacramento feeling fine and assume that they do not need a doctor. So where should someone go in Sacramento to go get medical care right after a crash, even if they feel fine?
The number one thing is to get checked out. A car accident, whether you feel it in that exact moment or not, is traumatic. It's traumatic for your body and it's traumatic, of course, for your mental health. So I think the best thing to do if you don't want to go to an ER or you don't think you need that level of care, which I completely understand, is to go to an urgent care, call, of course, maybe your primary care doctor or a nurse practitioner, or even go to a chiropractor. Get some kind of understanding of what's going on with your body. These places can take x-rays. They can also just assess your blood pressure. They can assess, palpate your areas to make sure that your body isn't tender or, problematic in any way. Right after a crash, you're going to have a lot of shock. You're going to have a lot of fight or flight response. So it's really important to just kind of go get checked out and then just make sure that you are okay. And in the next few days, if you start to feel anything worse, 100% definitely go back. Seek out additional medical treatment, again, with that urgent care, with the doctor, with the chiropractor, and they can really get you situated for a long-term recovery.
And then this single rule can be the difference between recovering everything and recovering nothing in some states. So how does California's pure comparative negligence rule actually change what a Sacramento crash victim can recover?
So California, in my opinion, luckily, follows a pure comparative negligence standard, which means that depending on the level of liability or fault that someone is placed at, depends on the recovery they can accept. At first glance, you kind of think, wait, is that fair? And the answer is yes, it is, because there are other states where you have a 50% or 51% at fault party, and that means you're barred recovery entirely. Now, you definitely don't want that. So in our pure system, you are essentially allowed to recover regardless of your percentage of fault. You're just modified by that percentage. So of course, let's say we have 100% fault on a third party. Let's say, you yourself as that first party who was injured is 20% at fault. You can still collect that 80% responsibility from that other party. Even if it's reversed, let's say you're 80% at fault and they're 20% at fault, again, you can still collect for that 20% liability that they owe you because they were still at fault. So that's what that means. And again, luckily in California, you being negligent at all is not a bar to your recovery. It just changes it a little bit. But if you hire a great attorney, we can always help you, with that.
Yeah. And then 3 different deadlines can wreck a claim, and most people only know about one of them. So how long do you have to file a car accident lawsuit in Sacramento, and what causes you to lose your rights to sue if the deadline passes?
That would be called the statute of limitations. The statute of limitations in California for a general car accident is 2 years. But you have to be very careful and very mindful of who you believe is responsible, because depending on who's responsible actually depends on if that changes or not. There's something called the Government Tort Claims Act in California. And if you believe that any government body or government entity is at all responsible for your accident and you want to go after them, meaning you want to hold them responsible, that statute of limitations is actually 6 months to file a special claim form with them. And that claim form is very specialized. You have to do one for each agency or each government entity you believe is at fault. And then you have different timelines from there to file a lawsuit against those entities. So, you really have to be mindful. There's also other kinds of things. If you're hit by an ambulance or something like that, you might want to be mindful of. But definitely in California, if you miss the statute of limitations, you cannot recover. So those timelines are incredibly specific. And they're incredibly specific to, again, your accident and what you believe happened, or what an attorney can help you assess who could potentially be at fault.
And then Sacramento has some unique evidence sources most people never think about. So what evidence beyond photos and medical records can make or break a Sacramento claim?
There's a lot of different things we can do to help assess fault or understand, what happened in an accident. Dash cams, ring camera footage, any type of restaurant or building footage. Those videos really help us kind of showcase an accident and showcase what was happening in the immediate time leading up to it. And also, of course, when it happened. There's all kinds of other things too. Red light, green light disputes are huge, especially when we have, a lot of actually the light sequencing that we do in Sacramento. So we can get the light sequencing reports, the traffic sequencing reports, and kind of figure that out and work backwards. We can also get to something called a SWITRS report. Those are reports that talk about different accidents that happen places where maybe there should have been something but wasn't. So there are a lot of different reports we can get to, look and again, see who is really at fault for this accident.
The first call from the adjuster usually comes within the first 24 to 48 hours of the crash. So what should you say, and especially not say, when the insurance adjuster calls after a Sacramento crash?
Generally speaking, your insurance company, obviously you have to report your accident, and you need to report the accident, much like you do with the state. So reporting an accident is not a bad thing. It's getting into your injuries, especially at a time frame when you're confused and you don't really know what they are. So you really want to be mindful of, what you're saying to them, what you're talking about, and what they're taking from your conversation. Definitely, it's important to remember that, you're going after, in certain times, someone else's insurance company, sometimes your own insurance company for your UM coverage. So you want to be mindful about what you're saying that can harm you. And really, the only way I can, any of us could really talk more in depth about that is really understanding your direct claims. So that's the point in time where I say, I'm not your attorney. I can't tell you what to say, what not to say. But definitely, if you have questions and you're concerned, you should hire an attorney, because again, they can help you navigate that. You can have that attorney-client privilege, and they can understand your direct circumstances to help you further.
Yeah. Almost every claim that comes in for repair has at least one of these mistakes already baked in. So what are the most common mistakes that hurt a Sacramento car accident claim the most?
I would say delay in treatment, definitely, because people often, like we said, you're in shock. First of all, you don't really understand what your injuries are, or otherwise you might think your injuries are just going to simply go away and dissipate when you wake up the next morning or in 2 weeks. So I would say delay in treatment. People oftentimes don't want to stop their daily lives, which makes perfect sense, to go get checked out and get that treatment. But that can really hinder your case because you're essentially already breaking the correlation between the accident and your injuries. That's a really big one. The other thing is not mitigating their damages, meaning they know they have a problem. And again, because of the way life works and we don't want to stop and get treatment, or we think, oh, we can handle it, we don't actually get the treatment that we need. So our injury ends up getting worse. That can be a problem, right? Because we need to, one, we want you to get better. But two, you're actually not following through with recommended treatment that's supposed to get you better. So you're inherently now becoming at fault for your injuries getting worse. Another problem people don't realize. And then three, I would say is social media. People showcasing a life that, isn't the life they're actually living. Of course, that's what social media, in my opinion, is really about, right? I mean, it's great for a lot of things, but it's also where people, I think, showcase a life that isn't necessarily what it is, right? They're not going to showcase themselves sitting on a bed for 2 weeks in pain. What they're going to do is show you that they just went out to a beautiful celebration, or they decided to go dancing or skydiving for the first time in their lives, because now they know life is short after this horrible accident. While I 100% appreciate that and want them to live their best life, that's not going to look good when you're saying that, then you went and couldn't do anything for a month. I believe you, but is someone else going to believe you? Probably not. So, it paints basically a whole different picture of what you're saying. And then, of course, a jury, an insurance adjuster, a mediator, anyone really is left to wonder who's the real you. So it can be very damaging.
Yeah. And then Sacramento sits on top of the I-5 freight corridor, and rideshare traffic is heavy at the airport in downtown, both adding layers a normal car accident doesn't normally have. So what special legal considerations apply when a commercial truck or riverside vehicle is involved in a Sacramento crash?
So a lot of different things. First of all, when you have a commercial vehicle, like a truck or really anything else, there are different policies available, and there are also different parties. There's multiple different third parties who can be at fault, right? The driver themselves, the owner of the actual commercial vehicle, and then anyone else of potentially what they're carrying. So there are a number of layers of who could be responsible. In terms of rideshare, well, that's, talk about layers. Depending on what phase these drivers are in, depending on, whether there's a passenger involved in their car, can really depend on what insurance limits you have available. So, the complexities around rideshare and commercial policies are vast. Again, really, it's trying to hold the proper people accountable, and it's trying to understand what layer of insurance you're entitled to. There can also be coverage gaps with these types of insurance policies. So again, really navigating a commercial vehicle policy or a rideshare policy yourself is incredibly difficult. I will say they don't always love to be transparent. So getting through to them, and again, unearthing all those layers, unearthing what you are entitled to, it's a big deal. And certainly any attorney like our office can help you with that.
And then some claims are simple enough to handle alone, most are not. So when should a Sacramento resident actually call a car accident attorney instead of handling the claim solo?
I think, people really worry, oh, my car accident isn't big enough, or I'm not injured enough to hire an attorney. I never think that's the case. What we are is attorneys for all people. And that means any type of accident. Certainly there are ways in which maybe you don't need us. And if you call us, we can tell you that. If you don't call us, you run the risk of not knowing and then really damaging yourself or your case. So I would say, when do you call an attorney? Always. Every personal injury attorney I know, at least should know, has a free consultation. Our office certainly does. You don't even need to call. You can even just go online. You can text us. You can fill out an online web submission. I mean, it's incredibly simple. And we'll get back to you as to whether we can help or not, or maybe we have more questions. So I think the answer is, if you're involved in an accident, always reach out. We'll tell you, yeah, you need us, or you know what, you really don't need us. Go ahead and do this on your own. But again, it's the best time to call is when it happens. You shouldn't wait around because there's so many different nuances that you might miss. again, such as forms that you might not file with the DMV that could get your license suspended. That no one wants that. That would be so unintentional. Or layers of insurance or coverage gaps, or just understanding basically what you're entitled to and what you should be doing for your health. All these questions should be lingering. And I say, call an attorney no matter what, just so you can have peace of mind, if that's the very least that you get.
If you or someone you know was in a car accident anywhere in Sacramento, Sacramento County, and the surrounding areas, whether on the I-5, the I-80, the US 50, the Capital City Freeway, or anywhere in the CA99, reach out to MVP Accident Attorneys for a free consultation. The deadlines move fast, and the California's Government Tort Claims Act, which is incorporated in numerous government code sections, including California Government Code Section 911.2, 6-month window for government vehicle claims is brutal. So call 833 MVP wins or visit www.themvp.com. That's 833 MVP WINS or visit themvp.com. Thanks for joining us and thanks for listening. I'm going to redo that over. Thanks for joining us today, Chelsee, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Cara.